So, I've come to Loch Spiny, which is an RSPB reserve, to talk a little bit about red squirrels. Now, red squirrels are our native UK species of squirrel. They're arboreal, which means that they live in trees, and they prefer to live in coniferous forests, which is where I am here. A coniferous forest is basically usually made up of things like Douglas fir and Scots pine. That's because the red squirrels really like to eat the pine cones that grow on these trees. In the spring and summer, the easiest way to try and track down birds is by waiting at a nest site. What I've got up here is a good example of a woodpecker nest site, and if I were trying to see one of those, is I'd wait out and I'd hope that the bird was going to come back to his site. It's not that easy with things like red squirrels because they actually live in something called a dray, and a dray basically looks like a big bundle of sticks, and they might have multiple drays dotted around the same woodland. So it's not quite as simple as waiting out at a dray and hoping that the squirrel comes back. So we have to employ a different method in order to track them down. Red squirrels might not have a favourite dray, but they often have a favourite feeding site. Now, what a squirrel looks for in a feeding site is usually somewhere that means that they've got a quick and easy way of escape, but also somewhere where they can see predators coming from a long way away. Something like this would be perfect. So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of going between locations a bit like this, and then looking for pine cones that have been eaten in a particular way. And when I find one, I'll show you. This is exactly what I was looking for. It's what I call a squirrel's dining table, and as you can tell, it's at a bit of a vantage point so that they can see any predators coming towards them. It's also covered in the leftover food from a squirrel's meal. The most obvious thing that we're looking for are the pine cones. Now, a pine cone is comprised up of lots of little bracts, and what the squirrel will do is he'll hold it in one hand like this and rotate it, chewing off the bracts one by one before dropping it onto the ground. And when he drops it, he'll leave a couple of bracts on the top untouched. The bracts themselves will be chewed right down to the base of the cone. So if you find yourself a table like this, you can almost guarantee that the squirrel is going to return. To such an extent in this case that I've actually got a squirrel above me who's been very helpfully throwing nuts down onto me while I've been trying to make this video. Contrary to popular belief, squirrels don't hibernate. They actually rely on the resources that they've hidden away during the spring, summer and autumn to get them through the cold, dark winter. So what they'll do is they'll push nuts underneath the surface of the grass, just like this, and then come back at a later date to find them. However, it turns out that squirrels lose about 25% of the nuts that they hide, and that's either because they've forgotten where they've hidden them, or because another squirrel has come along and stolen them. And so what they've observed is squirrels watching their backs all the time, and if they see another squirrel watching where they're hiding their nuts, they'll pretend to bury it in one location before actually burying it in a second location. It's impossible to talk about red squirrels without inevitably moving on to the subject of grey squirrels. Grey squirrels were introduced into the UK in the 1890s, and since then they've become prolific across the entire country. They're larger, more aggressive, eat more food, and are just generally better suited for the environment than the reds. And so, slowly but surely, they've pushed the reds out of their territories. I think what's important to remember when discussing grey squirrels is that they wouldn't be here if it weren't for us, and they're only doing what comes naturally. So although their populations are skyrocketing, we are inherently the problem. We should be conserving the red squirrels, but the greys are probably here to stay. Having said all that, and I don't want to end on doom and gloom, I hope that you've learned something about how to track down some red squirrels, and I wish you the best of luck in trying to find some squirrels for yourself.